So, John, isn't this the motor that was under the glass cover?
Yeah, from the year 1984. This is a representation of the Watson motor. It's actually Ron Cole and I actually built this motor in '84, and it's the motor Tom Bearden talks about that was under the bench that kept running.
So,
of course, by that time Watson had already given his demonstration and disappeared from the scene, and so I wanted to keep the technology, and so I put this one under glass, and nobody ever touched the motor, and it's on its original batteries except for one, which fell out in front of Tom Bearden in 2000. It fell out on the floor and crumbled on the floor, and he says, well, how are you going to run that motor? And I said, just pick the battery up, put it back in the motor.
Oh, tell them all about
Cross-wound coil. And
get in 946 p.m.
you want to see this, Garrett? Why don't you make sure you get this in there?
You have to drive them.
We're going to stop it and I'm going to lift it up and show you that the batteries
Little
on
are
the side
just
of the mountain, on the dead end.
hanging in there. And this is what the batteries look like.
Like you're living in the mountains.
That's wonderful.
And that's what happens when you back charge a battery.
Oh my goodness.
Which is almost.
And they're all about the same.
Yeah.
Dead. But you need them to complete the circuit for the machine to run. That's all. But see, I always thought Tom has to do work. You have to make those magnets do something, right?
You do, yes.
So we
And it
did.
worked?
Yeah, oh yeah. It's still running
wow.
on partially some of the batteries, and I only replaced the ones that actually crumbled,
Yeah.
and fell to, because zinc carbon batteries, after just sitting and sitting and sitting, they just naturally just leak out.
So you actually built this after the Jim Watson thing?
Well, I built it because I wanted to preserve the technology.
Yeah.
I wanted to save it, and basically what you have here is you have the motor, which is the center. And by the way, this is about the same time as we're working with Sparky Sweet with cross-wound coils.
Okay.
And so from everything that I learned about, cross-wound coils, I incorporated in this motor, because these two coils cannot interfere with each other. They're 90 degrees apart, opposed. So one becomes the generator, and what you're looking at here is the same piece that's in the Tesla switch. Right here, you're seeing the charge and then the discharge in opposite phases in the angle. And that's the pulse that runs back to the batteries. And then at the same time, I wanted to show how you could hook a drive system to it without anything touching, because I can do whatever I want with this drive system, and I could slow it down or speed it up for whatever I wanted as far as speed goes, to do something else, like to drive a fan or run another gear drive somewhere else. But it's all based upon that the magnetic fields they're rotating and spinning, and so you can take advantage of all that. And people don't understand that aluminum is very magnetic under these neo-boron magnets. And so what happens is eddy currents form in here, and you can see that when it gets the current, right, then the thing just speeds up. Probably about right in here somewhere. There you go. And when the current's just right and there's no drag, then you're at your fastest RPM. And so, but this shows the principle of the Watson machine, you know, the motor spinning, which the motor is in the center here,
Right.
and the generator is out here, and it's very magnetic out here.
Right.
You can see it, look. See?
So it snatches it towards
Yeah, it snatches it towards it. So those fields are huge out here, and you can see it moving around.
Mm-hmm.
See? So the fields are way out around the machine. Sort of like the fields on this window motor.
Yeah.
You know, and window motors are kind of unique because there's no iron in the motor. Okay, and I've got this one slowed down with just one pulse. See?
Okay.
So I'm coming every 180 degrees and kicking it out of this window. And it's a very powerful motor. They're torquey. You know, you can put a torque on them. And there's no iron in the motor. Everything is built out of wood and plastic. And so that's basically what the motor was. And people have asked for years, you know, well, how can it stay on these batteries and do this and do that? Well, we haven't done anything. Tony's been filming up here for the past 3 years, and the motor has always sat there, you know, and we never really got a good shot. And nobody ever really asked any questions about what the motor was. I think.
Yeah, I always wondered why it was under glass. It seemed like it must be the...
Well, I did that because I had the glass at one point in time taped, so that you couldn't remove the glass, because you know you have people come up to the lab or something and they want to run all these machines, and the unique thing about these machines is, since there's no iron involved in the machine, it can just accelerate to its maximum RPM without anything. And then this is a Cole, Ron Cole and I built these. This is what they call the bipolar switch motor. And you can see it's getting quite a bit of RPM. You can hear it.
So what limits the RPM? Is it the magnet?
As soon as the magnets reach the saturation point
Okay.
of the coil, the wire. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's the magnetic fields now getting bigger. Here. See, as the thing accelerates, remember I showed on the tuner, I might show that again. I might show on the scalar tuner that the magnetic fields are out here in the room. And so, you know, people think, well, gotta give it a minute to settle down. So. Okay, there we go. But see, the fields are so big, and the fields are way out here. You see the tuner detecting it. See how big these fields are. People think that magnetic fields don't disturb space, but they do.
So that's the field just
Being generated in scalar
From
for the
this-
discharge spike.
from this motor.
Yes. Because if I shut that motor off, that's going to go away. So if I shut it off, there's nothing there. And if I turn it on, and if we walk over to this one, it's somewhere in between here, we're going to find a big field. We're in a null position right here between the two rotors. Watch.
You got an active, yeah, it's double.
Mm-hmm.
Null.
Mm-hmm. Now it's looking at this wheel over here, and we'll turn the gain. Well, we can't even turn the gain down. We can't get far enough away.
Yeah, there's a huge spike right there. Hold on. Yeah, it's almost off the scale. Then it's about zero.
Mm-hmm. In between.
Yeah.
See? And then if we go around this way, the fields are starting to generate in space again out here.
Right.
And so the whole idea was to preserve the technology from a standpoint that we wanted to not touch this. We wanted to seal it under glass, to have the circuits, the batteries, and the way we constructed the whole motor, which was me in the middle of the night, but
So where are the batteries, John?
they're underneath the
In the base?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There used to be a battery right here, but everybody wanted to play with the battery. So I took the battery away and I left the circuitry up here. And what I did is, this is running on 6 volts. The same as a Tesla switch. We use 6 volts and 5 volts to run this. Mm-hmm. And so what the funny part of this whole story was that I built this motor and Gary decided we're going to a hi-fi show. And I took this to the hi-fi show and I sealed it under glass and put it up in the room during the hi-fi show. And the guard who was checking the rooms at night, he says, "How could that just keep running like that? That's like impossible." Mm-hmm. Well, nobody was offering any, statement or anything like that to him, and we just said it's one of our new developments. And of course, people saw it, well-to-do people saw this under glass and wanted to buy it, and they were starting to bid on this, and I wasn't accepting any bids. Yeah. But I think they had it up to like $50,000 or $60,000 just to put on their mantle, Yeah. And I guess, and I said, well, no, I'm going to keep this. And of course, we used it to explain the technology because it's always ran, and that's why we've kept it under glass. So that's a little history of this, Tony, unless you have another question about it.
You say you set it under the bench and it ran. How long did it run for under the bench?
It ran for 2 years underneath the bench. This is the one Tom Bearden talks about. This is the one that I refused to show any of the engineers that came in. They could see it under glass, but they couldn't touch it and they couldn't hook their scopes to it, or they couldn't do anything.
Do you have a name for this engine?
Yeah, this is a window motor.
It's a window motor.
Yeah, it's the same as this, except that it has a cross-wound coil, and what it does is recharge its own battery. It uses some energy, captures the spike, then dumps the charge from this coil back to the batteries again. So I can just sit there and do that. Right. It's been sitting. How long now, Tony, since Tom Bearden's been here? It's been sitting
2000. He was here in 2000.
In 2000.
It's
so it's been sitting
9 years.
all that time, 9 years, with the same batteries that started 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So, it's something that it's a toy. It's not a great big gigantic machine.
But it's a piece of history.
Yes, it represents the principle of the window machine. And of course, I'm going to tell you that there has been window motors on the internet that self-run. There were a couple of them that people got to self-run. And it's very easy to do if you understand this technology. Once again, I go back to Bearden. And Bearden actually put this in the books, what this is.
Right.
So, this is a little history. This was built between the years 1970 to 80. And it took time to build this because it's a model. It's always sat under the glass. It's sat on its same batteries for the entire time. So they are rotted. Peter was with me, and we taped them back up in there. We didn't bother changing them. Why change them, right? Battery's meaningless here. So anyway, is it Christmas or what? So. Oh, come on. You're looking at a window motor.
Okay.
So you're looking at a floating magnetic field.
The torque.
This is the SG technology.
Okay.
Little modified, but,
SG, that stands again for what? Schoolgirl.
well,
It's Bedini technology.
yeah, little girl motor.
You're Bedini, right?
Yeah, no, I'm John.
John, that's right. That's I know. He's a nicer guy too.
The black ball is it's out of the one of the bearings that guides the planetarium. When you're in a planetarium and you're watching the stars go by, and so I figured, well, my friend had a bunch of these, and I said, well, I'll just make something out of that because it's very hard and it's like carbon graphite. Okay, the functions of this machine are all in one. Whoa. This portion here, you can see, is not connected to anything. It's just on two bearings, and it makes up a transmission when the machine's running. So when the machine's running, it shows you the generator phases this direction and the motor function this direction. So if you wanted to change the speed, you would change the angle of the cone, and that makes up the transmission. That's a drag on the machine. That's just like having that propeller on the SG machine. But what this does is it sits on its batteries and its pulse is real high. The amplifier in this transistor is selected for beta, and the spike on this is like 400 volts. So alkaline batteries don't last too long when you backfeed them with this pulse. So what you're seeing here is the pulse. Can you all see the lights? You can see it changing phase as it goes around. That's the generator actually going positive and negative and positive and negative. Like an AC sine wave, and then it's rectified and sent back to the batteries. So you want to kind of keep it under control. And this provides a load to it. Now, thing about it is everybody talked about it on the internet. They said, yeah, but did he really build that machine? We've seen the pictures, but that can't be true. Well, there it is. You know, all in one. I wasn't going to talk, but I decided why not give you a little bit of history of how this all came about. This started with working with pendulums. Watching pendulums, what pendulums do, and I said, you know what, pendulums are kind of weird because, you know, if I don't own a planetarium somewhere, I can't have a pendulum. Because I wanted the real thing. I don't want a fake pendulum. And I just watched what goes on, and then I discovered that as Earth moves around, the pendulum starts to change direction and knocks over the little blocks all the way along. And pretty soon you're telling time, right? You can tell what the time is. So I said, Will that happen with this? And yes, it does, because the more of the little tidbits that I released and people started to build them, they started to report different things like, well, it runs faster at night than it does during the day. And the wave shape changes. And that's correct because gravity changes with the electromagnetic fields. So now if we really think about this, who is in control here? Gravity or electromagnetism? What would you say? Electromagnetism. Right. Right. Everything's controlled by electromagnetism. Gravity is just a property of it. So, if you have the right electromagnetics, what's that mean? That means you can lift off if you want to, if you can figure it out. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard. But these things do change. If you leave them undisturbed, don't touch them, it shows you there's no leakage current whatsoever from the machine. And the batteries just die all by themselves and leak. Because these are 15 years old, maybe 16 years old. They were leaking when I taped them up when we went to get the machine. And so I said, well, you're gonna let, what?
16 years ago was just 1990.
Yeah. Peter just answered your question. So the thing was to give you guys a little treat and kind of cover, you know, where this all went. And it started with the SG machine. It started with a pendulum. And pretty soon I got tired of watching the pendulum. But I did notice one thing this whole time, that when you built the right circuit and the pendulum was going, that it really wasn't using anything from the battery because it's just this little pulse every once in a while. And you've got an example of that on your wrist. You got a, what do they call it? You got that tuning fork, whatever that thing is. I never owned one, so I don't know. Accutron. But of course, when the battery dies, it dies. You got to put a new battery in it. But if you really think about it for a minute, if you get into a high electromagnetic area with an Accutron, it changes. I think De Palma proved that, didn't he, Peter?
Yes.
So these change. So can you really calculate the efficiency without knowing all the changes? Right, you could do it over time. But how much time do I have if the batteries don't die? I've been waiting 16 years. Batteries are still alive. And it's going to go faster. As the batteries build up, this thing's going to go faster and faster in increments. Not all at once, but in increments. And if you want to change the speed of the motor, and if you listen real closely, it's very low. Hear it? It's got a very low heartbeat to it. So it's really an interesting machine if you think about it, because it combines the SG, it combines the window motor, it combines the drive mechanism without any transmission at all. See how powerful it is? To stop the rotation and then go right back. That shows you that don't ever think that aluminum's not magnetic under these circumstances, because it's very magnetic, or it wouldn't be sitting here spinning. So if you want to come up, and actually look to make sure that John doesn't have any hidden things in there. The motor has to be an attraction. Now, what does that do? Does anybody know what that does when it's an attraction? Come on, somebody knows in this audience. Whoa.
Negative resistor?
I need Jack Daniels now. What? What?
Can you tell me what it means by saying the motor has to be an attraction?
That means, well, if I tell you that, you won't answer my question. Right, I'll answer it, but I want you to do the work.
You mean the coil and the magnet need to be attractively disposed when they're...
Right. What I...
Okay, I'll shoot for it. In attraction mode, you energize the coil before the magnet, the rotating magnet gets there, so it pulls it toward. Then you release it, and you get the full release of the energy stored in the coil.
Right, or could it be, or could it be that the magnet is attracted in all by itself and goes past the pole and then it fires? That's my question. And they call that, and let's not talk about whether Bearden said this or not. Let's talk about what I observed. If you pull the magnet, if the magnet gets attracted into the iron gets charged, doesn't it? But how did I just get that little increment of energy? What is that?
Magnetic energy that sucks it in.
Right. So if you suck it in, what does the machine have to do? To fire, it's not going to fire the magnet out because it's an attraction. Doesn't repulse. Right, it just gets sucked in and spit out because the coil reverses itself because the transistor's off. All right? So,
It's absorbing?
so you think to yourself for a minute, I just put it in there. I got the forward momentum for free. And I only had to do a little work to spit it out, and the coil did it. So I only burned a little bitty bit of energy to energize the coil, and then the coil automatically flips over and the magnet flies out. And so there's been a lot of people that say to me, well, we can energize the coil, and then all we have to do is just charge that coil, and then it can feed another coil, and that coil will flip over and the magnet will fly out. Wrong. It'll just stall. You can try it any way you want. It doesn't work that way. Physics is physics, guys. Electricity is electricity. You're not going to change the physical laws in your reality. They're going to either work or they're not going to work. So, as long as that's what you have to work with, why not take advantage of it? Let's just take advantage of the machine. Let's get everything out of the machine without expending any more energy than what the machine is capable of doing. This is running on 2 milliamps. So I guess the battery's going to run a long time. And it can sit on the batteries long. Well, 16 years is a long time. And if there was any leakage current in the circuit, I'm sure in 16 years the battery would be dead. Well, it actually is dead. When you start this thing, if you look at this coil in the center, by the way, this is the way the VTA works. This is what got me, John, booted out from Floyd Sweet's house. This machine. Why? because it represented what he was doing with the VTA, except that he was conditioning the magnets. And he was doing it, guys, in a toaster oven, so all this crap that you hear, I was there at the kitchen table. There was no secret to what he was doing. He was conditioning the magnet in a magnetic field just like this. And then he was holding it up to a TV that I gave him after he booted me out and saying, look at the cycloids. Look at where they're going around this magnet. There was, however, one thing when he first started that kind of got to me a little bit, because if I'm going to build something and show it to you, I'm going to let you look at it, I'm going to let you touch it. You can put your meter on it, you can do whatever you want. There's no big secret here. Anybody that holds a secret's not telling you anything and doesn't know anything. So, the VTA was conditioned in a toaster oven. And it was conditioned, make no mistake about it, it was conditioned with a one shot in a big coil. And the reason that he wanted the TV was so he could look at the magnetic field before he hit the button that conditioned the battery, because it had to be exactly at zero crossing. Now, was it any good? Yes. Was it dangerous? Yes. Could it do funny things? Yes. Could it run at every frequency that he first showed? No. He tested in the beginning with an amplifier, and on a film buried somewhere in the United States of America is John turning the oscillator, blinking the lights, and tracing out the wires. So if you know what you're doing, you can make a VTA work, and a VTA is made just like this. The trigger coil is this way, and the power coil is this way. And if you condition the magnets to where they only accept 60 cycles as a frequency, they will resonate, and when they do, you will get AC power.
Would they have to be barium magnets?
I don't know. I'm not quite certain. Then we had barium ferrite. Now we have strontium magnets. And we got number 8s. I think his were number 5s. And I also think that he didn't tell all. He would wait until you left at night, and then he would do something else. And you'd come back the next day, and the machine would either be working, or he'd say, nah, something happened. You must have wound the coil wrong, John. And I'd go back to the shop and pound some more nails in the board, and I'd wind some more coils for him. And I'd bring him the coils, and I'd leave them there, and he'd say, come back tomorrow. And he'd have them taped together in the box. And they looked exactly like this. And to my surprise, I would turn the oscillator down to 10 hertz and and 5 hertz, and the lights would blink. And I'd turn it to 50 hertz, and they get, to the same thing. Now they'd start to get steady, and I'd turn it to 1 kilohertz, and they'd still be there. And I'd turn it to 10 kilohertz, and they'd still be there. And I'd turn it to 20 kilohertz, and they would still be there. So I said to myself, doesn't make sense. Because if you're conditioning the magnet, and you want that magnet at one resonant frequency, then why should I be able to turn the generator from here to there? Oh, you're booted. And then later on I thought about it after looking at the pictures, and I said, oh look, he's got a 100-watt audio amplifier there. And there it was. was an ADCOM 100 watt mono amplifier. And when I turned that generator on, right, it would run through his coil arrangement and the lights would do the same thing the amplifier did. So it's sort of like a mag amp in a way. You know, I asked him about that in the beginning. I said, well, what is that, a mag amp? No. Well, what is it? Well, it works like this, John. Here, let me show you the cycloids. so cheap man's oscilloscope, basically, with a television set. So when I hear all this stuff on the internet about, you know, well, you have to do this, and you have to do that, and this has to happen, and that has to happen. No. It either works the first time, or it doesn't work, or you figure out why it doesn't work. So, this is a little bit of history about me. Now, what was the next one? John Sajeka. And what got me into trouble was the biharmonics machine. So, I was talking to John. Actually, John showed up in front of my house, and the way John Sajeka was, is he carried a pair of horseshoes, these lucky horseshoes where you put them together and take them apart. That's the way he showed up in front of my house, snapping his horseshoes. Do you want to come along with me? He said. I said, where are we going? He goes, come on. So I end up in Chatsworth, somewhere in California, and I end up in this a place called Anafuel. Have you ever heard of Anafuel? You know what Anafuel was? It was water gasoline. These guys were making water gasoline. You know, you drop the pill in your tank and you take the garden hose and you go like this. That's what they were doing. So I end up in his lab, and he says, oh, you can look at anything you want. And there's a magnet sitting over there that picks up gold, right, and silver, because I watched him win gold with it. Here's another machine that was very interesting in his lab. It looked like an air compressor. You started it like you started a lawnmower, and it would pump up the tank with air and run itself. What happened to it, nobody knows. But what its output was a car alternator. When it was running, it had enough power to run this car alternator that would charge your batteries or do whatever you want to do. The next one was the Hendershot machine. Ed Skilling happened to have those coils. Ed Skilling made I don't know how many machines in his life, and none of them worked, and he'd bring them over to Hendershot, and Hendershot would put his hands on them and squeeze the coils, and they would work. So, a little bit of history who ended up in my shop. The next one was Pat Flanagan, in a white robe, spreading gardenias around my shop. Rhonda would come in the morning and go, oh my God. The next one was Ed Stark, the dowser. These were all people during this time that people on the internet have no idea. But how would your wife feel if somebody ended up in your shop with a white robe spreading gardenia? I don't think that would go over too good. So, I've had them all at my shop. I know them all. Here and there, I know them. If it's just in passing, at one point in time, I knew exactly what they were doing. So, when people get on the internet in these groups and they start talking, well, this is what Sparky Sweet did. No. It's kind of hard. Sometimes it's hard for me to resist and go, you know what, you're full of crap. You know, I sat with the guy at his kitchen table. He asked me if I wanted a banana. Well, I'm going to tell you something about Floyd Sweet. Floyd Sweet was really smart because he was trained by Crone, Gabriel Crone. And if you wanted to do electromagnetics, this guy could do it. He had a generator that he never put out. Nobody ever got to see this. But it's basically, I think, like what the dual monopole is supposed to be. But Floyd Sweet's worked. The other thing that got me in trouble with Floyd Sweet was the G-field, the gravity wave converter that we called. John Sajaka had a name for it. He said it was apart from a spaceship. Don't you know that, John? They left that behind. And I said to myself, well, they left you behind too, but... Because I never looked at it that way, you know. I just said, oh, this is very interesting. You know, you load it down, you short it out, it speeds up. You can do all these different things with it. It likes a big high impedance load, and in a low impedance load, it just runs away wild, just keeps going. Look, the current goes down, it must be free energy. Look, I'm generating power and the current's going down in the front battery. I have a free energy machine. No, you don't. You are fooling yourself. Energy is going to come from things that come from space itself, from the energy, the plasma field in space. That's where you're going to get your free energy. That's exactly, you're going to have to develop some kind of semiconductive material that acts like an energy dam. And you're going to have to be able to build the charge up and bleed that charge off at a certain rate. And that's the way you're going to get your energy. Or you're going to develop a new type of fuel that just confounds everybody. But for one moment in time, don't think that it won't be done, because it will be, because anything you can think of, you can do. You know, just put your mind to it. Oh, you want to build that machine, you can build it. But that's only because you got these. And so, what, go ahead. You got your hands. And you can think, you know, you can think, yeah, a computer might say, oh, that's just a big zero. You, on the other hand, may say, I see a number in that zero. And I don't care if it's negative 5 million. Because that's the other end. Positive end's one end, negative end's the other end. So, anyway, yes, guys, it can be done. The batteries can recharge themselves, except there's one problem. The battery doesn't last. It can't keep taking that. Now, you notice it's getting brighter. It keeps getting brighter here. And the beat keeps changing. Kind of hard to hear, but it's there.
There you go.
Yeah. Now, as the electromagnetic field changes, as the Earth moves from light to dark, and the moon goes this way, now I'm getting you, right? Now you're thinking I'm wearing a tinfoil hat. Okay? But that's not true. Not yet. But as it changes, it affects the fields that things work in. And that can be measured. And there's a lot of people that do that all the time. I think you got Eric Dollard here, he does it. He measures those fields. You've got other people that are taking measurements all day long. You've got people that are studying gravitational waves. Now, what's a gravitational wave? When somebody says, oh, I made a gravitational tuner. Could it be what they're actually looking at is what they call shot noise? Popcorn noise. You ever heard the terms? Okay, when you make a semiconductor, you lay down this lattice and you dope it, and then you add where the emitter is going to be, and the collector, of course, is the substrate. And you turn around and you measure that transistor and you say to yourself, oh, it's noisy. You look real close, you will see this fine, fine, fine noise.
Yes.
And audiophiles always say, I can hear it. Really, they can't hear it, but they say they can hear it. And it sort of is like, if you were to listen to the noise, it would be like an oscillation that's ringing. That's what it would sound like. So every once in a while you get an electrical circuit in one of these amplifiers or something like that, and you see something strange occur. You see it go into a self-oscillation, and of course we'd like to get all that out of the circuits, because that means in the middle of the night, if you leave your amplifier on, right, what's going to happen is this thing's going to oscillate, and then the output transistors are going to go, bye. And that's why your amplifier burns out in the middle of the night. Because something happens where some noise develops that's at a very high frequency that the devices cannot handle. So what do? They turn themselves on full. And they cross-conduct. And the minute they cross-conduct, poof. So these little things that are noises, by the way, are all inspired by gravity. There's a noise that can be detected, right? And it usually is found in semiconductors. And so you got people on the internet going, I just built a gravitational wave tuner. And you say, okay, what's it detecting? Well, I don't know, but here's the signal. And so an audio guy might know this. Say, oh, shot noise, popcorn noise. You need to find a device that's quieter, right? So that's why they keep changing things. That's why they try to use FETs now, right? Because they want that noise way down. They want the noise floor way down. And when they had germanium transistors, you had much more of a possibility of discovering this than what you have with a silicon transistor. Moiré was an example. What did Moiré actually build? What did he actually dope it with? Did he use radium? Of course. Can you paint the antenna, an antenna wire with radium paint? Yeah. Can you gain signal strength? Yeah. These are all things that we can use that unfortunately are taken away because people abuse them. You can't paint a watch dial and suck on the brush at the same time because you're going to go loony. You're going to become a lunatic. You know, and then they're going to give you radium water to drink. They've done all this. So it's a little bit of history about these machines. And I'm going to tell you, I'm telling you where the free energy is going to come from. It's going to come from when you develop this device that can detect it, its noise or whatever it is, rectify it, and give you what you call this, electricity. Otherwise, it's unknown. It'll be unknown. Because plasma, what can you do with that? I can't box it up and bring it to you and say, here, hack this plasma ball into my computer and it's going to run. It's not going to run. It's a different form of energy. So when I said to you, I am using one form of energy on the input of the machine and another form of energy, which is a transformation of that, on the output of the machine, that's what I meant. Okay, can you charge a battery with a spike? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Yes.
But how much longer does it take? So what does the spike actually do with the battery? It hammers it, doesn't it? Because it's impulses. Beats it up. So what's it actually beating up?
Electrons.
So that means I can take a sulfated battery then and beat it up and break up the sulfated crystals in it. And all of a sudden my battery starts to work again because this stuff breaks off the plates and falls to the bottom. And that's true, you can do that. Peter and I have many, many hours in batteries. He's tried to write everything for everybody that he possibly could in a book. Eric's wrote books. He's trying to give you the information that he can give you. Tom and Eric and the rest of them are the only ones that are building circuit boards for this stuff because I don't have time to build it. I've got my hands full with chargers because I like chargers. I like solar stuff, so I like to play with the solar stuff. And the more unique circuits I can come up with the solar stuff, the happier I get. And I'll be dead anyway, so it won't make any difference if yours works or not. But you will figure it out. In other words, it will work for you. If you just put your mind to it, this will work. And that's a little bit of the history of what I've been doing. I'm actually into my solar stuff right now, so I haven't had time to work with the crystal batteries, and I haven't had time. I've made so many motors in my shop that I don't think that I can think of one piece of metal that I haven't tried to turn on the lathe, or one magnet that I haven't bought, you know, that I tried to put into something and do something with. But what my enjoyment is now is just giving you guys the information. You know, here, look at it, here it is, John didn't hide it.
I had to salvage this. I found an old video from 2000 with you and Tom, and this was in there somewhere.
Right, but that was built in '84. So Pat, you need to come in. You need to come in and ask questions, John. When did you
Okay,
build this motor?
okay.
You know, what was going on at that time?
But my point being that that's the only video I could find of this motor running.
Right? Because there never was one.
Yeah,
Only when I built it. I think I sent it to him, right?
which he then lost.
Right, he did.
Yeah.
That's been under glass so long. That's the one Tom Bearden talks about. I'll explain it to you.
It was running under the bed or something,
Yeah, that's it. Was running under the bench.
under the
And-
bench, right?
Yeah, it was running under the bench, and it's the one he also talks about when he came up in 2000. He says, John, let's run this motor.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked it up to bring it out on the bench to run it, and the batteries fell out of it.
I have that on film.
They were all crusted over, right? They were completely dead.
So you replaced those batteries, right?
One, I think,
Oh, really?
yeah.
I'll ask that question then.
Don't get too close to me. Neomax. Yep.
Whoops.
No.
Sorry.
You'll find this pulse in your film that you don't want.
No, it was the batteries that were pulsing the film. That's the weird part.
Well,
Nothing was running, but the nothing was running, but the thing was still pulsing. And I finally figured out it must be coming out of the charged batteries that was still pulsing. Weirdest thing, man.